This conference will now be recorded.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. Doug Smith. It's 2:30 on Wednesday afternoon, so it's time for our 2:30 Monday through Thursday podcast. This is the podcast where you'll hear the science about what actually happened in the opioid crisis. Speaking of science, what you're looking at on the screen is not necessarily science. As you guys know, I'm writing the book. I'm on chapter 7 out of 9. I can see the end of the writing, so we'll have to go through the editorial process, getting the graphics put in place, getting the bibliography done. Lots of work still ahead. But as I'm writing the book, I'm going through old files, and I came across this article by Dr. Alan Leshner. If I'm not mistaken, this article was printed in a medical journal in 1997. This is the article in the United States that kind of launched the dopamine theory of addiction, the brain disease model of addiction. Alan Leshner, who's a psychologist, just kind of comes out and says addiction is a brain disease. And that's a lot of what the book is about, at least some of what the book is about, is that these psychiatrists, these psychologists, these addiction experts, they don't really follow the rules of science. In science, you don't get to come out and just make a statement like that. Okay, addiction is a brain disease. Okay, statements like that come from research. They come from doing experiments, doing clinical trials, finding out information. The type of science that we practice today, for those of you who want to know, is called Popperian science, named after Dr. Karl Popper. And in Popperian science, you state a hypothesis, you make predictions, and then you design experiments to test your predictions. Okay, you don't just come out and make a statement like addiction is a brain disease. Okay, no, you've got to. Oh, well, you can make that if that's your hypothesis. Addiction is a brain disease, then you've got to test it. You've got to design clinical trials and experiments to test your hypothesis. That's how real science is done. But that's not what the psychiatrists and the psychologists do. In fact, as I just said, we practice a type of science today called Popperian science, named after Dr. Karl Popper. And in the book, we discuss at length that Dr. Popper was pretty clear that, in his opinion, psychology, psychiatry, they're not real science. That's not real science. They don't meet the criteria of what is and is not real science. And this is a perfect example of why they're not real science. You can't just make statements like this. Okay, statements like this have to come through a process, a scientific process. You don't just make the statement and make the claim. You have to have evidence to back it up. Okay, addiction is a brain disease. Where's your evidence? That's the point. Where's your evidence? Okay, where is your evidence? Addiction is a brain disease. Okay, great, wonderful. Where is your evidence? Okay. Let me see. Let me read a little bit of this. A core concept that has been evolving with scientific advances over the past decade. Yeah, see, scientific advances, they pretend they're scientific. Okay, a core concept that has been evolving with scientific advances over the past decade is that drug addiction is a brain disease that develops over time as a result of the initially voluntary behavior of using drugs. The consequence is virtually uncontrollable compulsive drug craving, seeking, and use that interferes with, if not destroys, an individual's functioning in the family and in society. This medical condition demands formal treatment. Okay. All right. Right there. Okay. They've missed it. Okay. You know why you went out and bought pills. You know why you went out and bought fentanyl. You know why you went out and bought heroin. You couldn't stand the sickness. Okay. And let's read their concept again. A core concept that has been evolving with scientific advances over the past decade is that drug addiction is a brain disease that develops over time as a result of the initially voluntary behavior of using drugs. The consequence is virtually uncontrollable compulsive drug craving. No, you know as well as I did, you did not have uncontrollable compulsive drug craving. You would have been just as happy to stop taking the opioids. You didn't want to take the opioids anymore, but you couldn't stand the sickness. And the only way out of the sickness, or to prevent the sickness, was to take the opioids. These people completely got it wrong. They got it wrong. They saw the behavior. They saw that you were going out and buying pills, buying heroin, buying fentanyl. They saw the behavior, and they came to the wrong conclusion. They concluded that you were craving to get high, okay? That you had uncontrollable compulsive drug craving, seeking, and use, okay? No, you couldn't stand the sickness. Nobody could, okay? The sickness we now understand is a loss of control of the internal organs and organ systems, okay? You were genetically damaged in 450 million year old DNA, and the results were horrible. Why were the symptoms so severe? Because the DNA that was damaged was 450 million years old. Of course the symptoms are going to be severe. This is DNA that's fundamental to life itself. This isn't DNA that's 50 million years old. This is DNA that's 450 million years old. Okay? And so here is a perfect example of so many things. It's a perfect example of how the psychiatrists and the psychologists are not scientific. Okay, this is a perfect example of pseudoscience. And we cover this in the book in detail. This is important. Okay, what these people did was they got themselves in power in the bureaucracies. They got themselves in power at HHS. They got themselves in power at the FDA. They got themselves in power at the CDC. And once they had their hands on control of the levers of power and money, this is what they did. Okay, they're not scientific. They pretend they are. And you can see it right here. Okay, that first sentence in the second paragraph that says, a core concept that has been evolving with scientific advances. No, you people are not scientific, and those are not scientific advances. You're pretending that they are. You're pretending you're scientific. You're posers. You're wannabes. You're not the real thing. Okay, Dr. Karl Popper was right. You are not scientific. Dr. Karl Popper, the originator of modern day Popperian science, the father of modern science, said it best back in the 1920s and 1930s when Dr. Karl Popper said that psychiatry is pseudoscience. It's not based upon real science. It never will be real science. And you're looking at it right here. But these people got themselves into positions of power, and look what they did to you. Speaking of looking at things. All right, 2:38. That's long enough. We will hold here for today. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. As always, like and subscribe to us. Post this podcast on your social media and everybody else's social media. And we will be back tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.